Marcus Webb had exactly 11 days before the bank sent the second notice. He knew this because he had counted. He had counted the same way he counted everything in his life since his wife died 14 months ago. Quietly, alone, at the kitchen table, after Lily went to bed. The mortgage was 3 months behind. The truck needed new brake pads. Lily's school shoes had a hole starting near the left toe, small enough that she hadn't noticed yet, but Marcus had noticed. He noticed everything. That was the problem with being the only adult in a house. You noticed everything and had no one to share the weight of noticing. He posted the room for rent on a Tuesday evening. 3 lines. No photos. Spare room available. Private home. Single dad household. Quiet expected. He added his phone number and refreshed the page twice, as if that would make the listing more effective. It did not. The room had been his wife Carol's art studio. She had painted there on weekend mornings while Lily played with blocks on the floor beside her. The room smelled faintly of dried paint and the lavender candles Carol liked. Marcus had left it untouched for 13 months. Then he packed the paintings carefully into the hall closet, rolled the rug, moved in a single bed and a small dresser, and told himself this was just practical. This was just a room. Rooms were for living in. Lily stood in the doorway and watched him work. She didn't ask where the paintings went. She was 9, but she understood more than 9-year-olds were supposed to. She had her mother's eyes and her father's habit of going quiet when something mattered too much for words. She watched Marcus smooth the bed cover over the mattress, and then she went back to her homework without saying anything at all. Marcus was grateful for that. He didn't think he could have explained it without his voice doing something embarrassing. 3 people came to see the room that first week. The first was a young man named Owen who smelled like cigarettes and asked if pets were allowed. Marcus said no to both the pets and Owen. The second was a woman in her late 40s named Gloria, who seemed pleasant but immediately asked if she could repaint the walls. Marcus told her the walls were fine. She disagreed. That was the end of Gloria. The third arrived on a Thursday afternoon in a dented silver Honda Civic that had a cracked side mirror held together with electrical tape. She parked slightly crooked on the curb the way people do when they're not used to parallel parking on residential streets. She was young, maybe 20 or 21, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing jeans that had a small bleach stain on the left knee and a gray university sweatshirt that was one size too large. She had a backpack over one shoulder and mismatched sneakers, one white, one very slightly cream, which Marcus suspected she had not noticed. Her name was Jenna Park. She shook his hand with a firm grip, looked him directly in the eye, and said she was a second-year student at the university studying environmental policy. She was quiet and polite in the way of someone who had been taught good manners and had also decided, on their own, that those manners were worth keeping. She asked 3 questions: whether there was reliable internet, whether Lily had allergies she should know about, whether the kitchen was shared or off-limits after 8 in the evening. Marcus answered all 3. She asked nothing about the price. He told her the monthly rent. She nodded. Then she opened her backpack and pulled out an envelope and placed it on the kitchen counter. 3 months, she said. In advance. Cash, if that was acceptable. Marcus looked at the envelope. He looked at Jenna. He thought about Owen and Gloria. He picked up the envelope. That was the whole transaction. She moved in the following Saturday with 2 bags, a small electric hot plate, a very old laptop, and a stack of university textbooks. She carried everything herself. When Marcus offered to help with the second bag, she said thank you and let him take it, which he appreciated. Some people refused help in a way that made the helper feel unnecessary. Jenna was not like that. The first week was careful and polite on both sides. Jenna used the kitchen between 6 and 7 in the evening. She cooked rice on her hot plate in her room, mostly, but sometimes she made tea in the kitchen and left the counter cleaner than she had found it. She left her shoes by the front door, slightly crooked, always the same way. Marcus found this oddly charming, and then wondered why he had noticed. Lily met Jenna on the 3rd morning. Lily came downstairs early for a glass of water and found Jenna already at the kitchen table with her laptop open and a mug of tea she had made using her own tea bags. Lily sat down across from her and stared in the open way that 9-year-olds stare when they have not yet learned that staring is impolite. Jenna looked up and said, "Good morning." Lily said good morning and then asked immediately whether Jenna was from Korea. Jenna said her family was originally from Korea, but she had grown up partly here and partly in other places. Lily considered this for a moment and then asked if Jenna could say something in Korean. Jenna said a short phrase. Lily repeated it badly, and Jenna corrected her gently, and Lily tried again, and Jenna said that was much better, which was not entirely true, but was entirely kind. Lily beamed. Marcus, watching from the hallway, said nothing and went back upstairs to get ready for work. That evening, Lily came to Marcus while he was washing dishes and told him that Jenna was helping her with her fractions worksheet. Marcus dried his hands and went to the dining room doorway. Jenna had Lily's notebook open on the table between them and was drawing small diagrams to explain how denominators worked. She had not been asked to do this. She had simply seen the worksheet on the table and offered. Marcus watched them for a moment. Then he went back to the kitchen and finished the dishes. He thought about the envelope of cash on the counter. He thought about a young woman with mismatched sneakers and a cracked car mirror paying 3 months in advance without negotiating. He thought about the way she had looked around the house when he showed her the room, not quickly, the way people do when they're just being polite, but slowly, taking it in, as if she were memorizing it. He told himself that students with generous grandparents existed. He told himself that some families simply had money, and that this was not unusual or suspicious. He told himself a lot of things while the dishwater drained and the kitchen went quiet. He believed most of them. By the end of the second week, Jenna had become a quiet and steady presence in the house in the way that some people become, not intrusively, not loudly, but simply there, reliably, in the background of ordinary things. She waved at Lily in the mornings. She said goodnight before going upstairs. She left a small bag of good coffee on the kitchen counter one day with a note that said she'd bought too much by mistake, and Marcus could have it if he wanted. Marcus made a cup with it the next morning. It was very good coffee. He thought about what kind of mistake led to buying that particular kind of coffee, and then he stopped thinking about it and drank the cup. He had enough problems without inventing new ones. The brake pads waited. The mortgage moved 1 month closer to current. The hole in Lily's shoe stayed small for now. The hall closet held Carol's paintings in the dark, and the spare room was no longer empty, which was the only thing that had needed to change, or so Marcus believed. He would understand later, much later, that a room doesn't just change when someone moves in, it changes what surrounds it, and the surroundings had already begun to shift in ways he hadn't noticed yet, the way a floor begins to settle before anyone hears the creak. 2 months into Jenna's time in the house, Marcus noticed the car. It was a black vehicle, large, clean, with tinted windows, and it parked near the end of the block, not directly in front of the house, far enough away to seem incidental, close enough that Marcus, who was not a suspicious man by nature but had become a careful one by necessity, noticed it on 2 separate mornings while walking Lily to the corner where she caught the school bus. The first time, he thought nothing of it. The second time, at exactly the same spot, and with the engine running despite the car not going anywhere, he thought something of it, but could not name what. He mentioned it to Jenna that evening in the way a person mentions something when they want a reaction without seeming to want one. He said that a black car had been parked near the corner 2 mornings in a row, and that he didn't recognize it from the neighborhood. Jenna looked up from her textbook. Her expression did not change in any visible way. She said she hadn't noticed it. Then she went back to her reading. It was a perfectly ordinary answer. It was also, Marcus would think later, the most careful non-answer he had ever heard in his life, because she had not said she didn't know what it was. She had said she hadn't noticed it. That was a different thing entirely. But he let it go, because letting things go was what a reasonable person did when they had no actual evidence of anything and only a very mild feeling in the back of their chest that something was slightly off-center. Marcus was a reasonable person. He let it go. It was Lily who found the business card. Lily was not a nosy child in the way of children who are doing it on purpose. She was curious the way all children are, genuinely and completely, without any real awareness of the boundary between her own business and other people's. She had been helping Jenna find a pen in Jenna's coat pocket, a task Jenna had asked for her help with because her hands were holding a pot of boiling water and the pen was somewhere in the left pocket, and could Lily please find it quickly? Lily found the pen. She also found a small stiff card that came out with it and fell to the kitchen floor. She picked it up and looked at it the way 9-year-olds look at things that have words on them, meaning she read every word on it carefully and thoroughly. Then she brought it to Marcus that evening the way she brought him things she didn't understand but sensed were interesting, with both hands extended and a very specific expression on her face that meant she was being helpful and had absolutely no idea she might be doing anything complicated. Marcus took the card. It was a clean, cream-colored card, heavy paper stock, the kind you only noticed was expensive when you held it. It said, in simple clean print, Park Industries, and below that, 2 office locations, Seoul, New York. He held it for longer than he needed to in order to read it. He set it on the kitchen table and looked at it for another moment. Then he asked Lily where she had found it. She explained about the pen and the pocket and the boiling water. Marcus nodded and told her she had done nothing wrong and she could go finish her book. She seemed mildly disappointed that the card had not produced more of a conversation, but she went. Marcus left the card on the table and went to his laptop. He typed Park Industries into the search bar and pressed enter with the kind of composure that is actually the opposite of composure. The search returned a great deal of information very quickly. Park Industries was a large conglomerate based in Seoul, with holdings in shipping, infrastructure, and clean energy. Its revenue, according to the most recent available figures, was measured in the billions. Its chairman and founder was a man named Chae-won Park. Marcus scrolled. He found a profile article from a Korean business publication. There was a photo of Chae-won Park, a composed, gray-haired man in a dark suit who had the particular stillness of someone used to being photographed. And beside him, in a smaller photo inset in the article, was a young woman identified as his daughter, his only daughter, currently studying abroad at a university in the United States. Marcus looked at the photo for a long time. He closed the laptop. He opened it again. He looked at the photo again, as if the second look might produce a different result. It did not. He closed the laptop a second time and sat in the kitchen for a while. The house was quiet. Upstairs he could hear Lily turning pages. Down the hall, a thin strip of light came from under Jenna's door. He made himself a cup of coffee, the good coffee, her coffee, which he'd been stretching for 2 weeks, and sat at the table with it and thought about a girl with mismatched sneakers and a cracked car mirror and an envelope of cash paid without negotiation. He thought about the black car at the end of the block. He thought about the firm handshake and the 3 careful questions and the way she had looked around the house when he showed her the room, slowly, as if she were memorizing it. He thought about the way she had helped Lily with fractions without being asked, the way she left her shoes by the door every night, slightly crooked, always the same way, the way she had left good coffee on the counter and called it a mistake. He sat with all of this for a long time. Then he drank his coffee, rinsed the mug, and went to bed. He did not knock on Jenna's door that evening. Whatever this was, it would still be true in the morning, and confronting things after 8 o'clock at night had never once made them easier. In the morning, before he had even made his first cup of coffee, something else happened. Lily came downstairs with a piece of paper in her hand and placed it flat on the kitchen table in front of Marcus with the focused gravity of someone delivering a document. It was a printout. She had found it on the shared printer in the school library the previous afternoon and brought it home folded in her backpack because it had a picture of Jenna on it, and she thought that was interesting. The printout was a screenshot of a social media post that had shared a screenshot of a Korean news article. The headline, in translation, read, "Where is Soo-yeon Park?" And beneath the headline was a photograph. It was not a photograph of Jenna the university student with the bleach-stained jeans. It was a photograph of a young woman at some kind of formal event, in a dark formal dress, standing beside an older man in a dark suit. Her hair was down, she was wearing earrings. But it was Jenna's face. There was absolutely no question. Marcus looked at the printout. He looked at the photo. He looked at the name in the headline, Jenna Park, and understood, with the slow certainty of something he had already almost known, that the girl sleeping down the hall was not simply a student named Jenna Park who paid cash in advance and made good tea. Lily said, "Do you know who that is?" Marcus said, "Go get ready for school, please." Lily went. She looked back once at the top of the stairs, but she went. Marcus sat alone at the kitchen table, with the printout in his hands, and the thin strip of morning light coming under the back door, and the smell of a house that was being quietly, significantly, rearranged around him, without his knowledge or consent. He heard movement in the hallway, footsteps on the stairs, the sound of the kettle being lifted. He waited. Jenna, Jenna, came into the kitchen in her oversized gray sweatshirt, hair loose, carrying her own mug. She said good morning. She went to the kettle. She filled it. She did not immediately look at the table. Then she did. She looked at the printout for 2 full seconds. Then she turned off the kettle and sat down across from Marcus. She did not look away from him, and he did not look away from her. The piece of paper sat on the table between them, and neither of them touched it. The silence that followed was the kind that does a great deal of work. Marcus said, "I think we need to talk." She said, "Yes." And so, at 7 in the morning, in a kitchen in a house, with a mortgage that was still 1 month behind, and a child upstairs, putting on shoes with a hole beginning at the left toe, the conversation began. She told him everything, in a voice that was steady and quiet and did not ask for sympathy. She told him that her name was Jenna Park, not Jenna, though Jenna was a name she had used since secondary school in the United States, because it was easier, and because it was hers in a way her full name had never quite been, attached as it was to everything that came with being Jenna Park's daughter. She told him that she was not hiding from her father in the sense of running away. She was not afraid of him. He was not an unkind man. She told him this clearly and specifically because she could see the way Marcus's jaw had set, and she wanted to correct the story his face was already starting to tell. She was hiding, she said, from what came with his name, from the car that waited outside whatever building she entered, from the people who treated her differently the moment they knew who her father was, the ones who became too kind, too eager, too careful. From the version of herself that existed inside all of that, which she had spent 20 years being without ever choosing it. She had wanted 1 semester, just 1, to be a person who was not her father's daughter first and herself second. To live in a real house with real people and pay real rent and help a child with fractions and make tea in someone else's kitchen. To see if she could do it. To see if she was a person underneath the infrastructure of everything her father had built around her. She had chosen this house, she said, because of the listing. 3 lines, no photos. A man who described his home simply and honestly. And because she had done her research, she said this without apology, and she had seen that the mortgage was behind, and that the household was genuinely struggling, and that the rent money would matter here, in a way it would not matter somewhere else. She wanted the money to be real. She wanted to pay it to someone who needed it. Marcus listened to all of this without interrupting. When she finished, the kitchen was very quiet. He asked one question first. He said, "Did you actually need the money?" She said, "No." He looked at the table. Then he looked at her. He asked his second question. He said, "Did you know that I did?" She said, "Yes. That's why I picked you." Marcus sat with that for a moment. He was not sure whether to be grateful or to be something else entirely. He landed, after a moment, somewhere between the two. Not angry, not moved, simply steady, the way he had learned to be steady in the months since Carol died, when everything had required steadiness and there had been no one else available to provide it. He said, "All right." She blinked. She said, "All right." He said, "You paid your rent, you were honest with Lily. You didn't make my house complicated." He paused. "You left the kitchen cleaner than you found it." She looked at him for a moment. Something in her face shifted very slightly, the way a held breath releases without sound. Lily came downstairs then in her school clothes, carrying her backpack, ready to go. She looked at both of them at the table, with the particular radar of children who can tell when adults have been talking about something real. She looked at the printout. She looked at Jenna. She said, "So you're famous?" Jenna said, "Not exactly." Lily considered this. Then she said, "Are you in trouble?" Jenna said, "I don't think so." Lily nodded, in the way of someone who has received a reasonable answer and is choosing to accept it. She said to Marcus that she was going to miss the bus, and Marcus stood up and the ordinary machinery of a morning restarted around them. Backpack, keys, shoes, front door. Even as something beneath it all had changed in ways that none of them had names for yet. But the day moved forward. It always did. The car at the end of the block was still there that morning. Marcus saw it as he walked Lily to the corner. He looked at it once and did not mention it. He already knew what it was. He was beginning to understand what it meant, and he was starting to realize that the quiet he had valued in this house for the past 2 months had not been the absence of things. It had been the surface of them. The knock at the front door came on a Friday afternoon, 11 days after Marcus and Soo-yeon's conversation in the kitchen. Marcus was at the kitchen table grading a stack of woodworking assessments from his Year 9 class. Lily was at her after-school art program until 5. Soo-yeon was at the university. The knock was 3 times. Firm, patient. The knock of someone who was not worried about whether anyone would answer. Marcus opened the door. There were 2 men on the front step. Both were in dark suits that were too neat for the neighborhood and too quiet for the afternoon. One of them held a phone. The other held nothing, and behind them, on the street in front of the house, not near the corner anymore, not pretending to be incidental, the black car sat with its engine off and its doors open. And beside the car, standing on the pavement with his hands clasped in front of him, was a man Marcus recognized immediately from a newspaper photograph he had spent more time studying than he wanted to admit. Chaewon Park was smaller in person than Marcus had expected. Not short, just not large in the way that powerful men are sometimes imagined to be large. He was perhaps 62 or 63, slim, with gray hair cut close. He wore a dark coat and a plain tie, and the expression of someone who had made many important decisions in his life, and had arrived here having made another one, which was that he was going to be calm regardless of what this took. Marcus stepped out of the doorway rather than back into it. This was not a deliberate choice. It was the instinct of a man who did not step backward. Chaewon Park crossed from the car to the front step in a few quiet strides. He stopped an arm's length from Marcus and looked at him in a direct, uncomplicated way. He said, in English that carried a light accent but was entirely precise, "Mr. Webb, my name is Chaewon Park. I believe my daughter has been staying in your home." Marcus said, "She has." There was a pause. Chaewon said, "I would like to speak with you." Marcus said, "She's not here right now." Chaewon said, "I know. I would like to speak with you." Marcus looked at the 2 men on the step and the car on the street, and a man who ran a multi-billion-dollar company standing on his narrow front path with the patience of someone who was genuinely trying to be reasonable. He stepped aside and held the door open. Chaewon said something brief to the 2 men in Korean. They remained outside. He came in alone. Marcus led him to the kitchen. He asked if he wanted water or tea. Chaewon said water would be fine, thank you. Marcus filled 2 glasses. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table where, 11 days earlier, Marcus had sat across from Chaewon's daughter and heard a story about a girl who had wanted to know if she was a real person. Chaewon looked around the kitchen in a quiet, thorough way. He looked at Lily's drawings on the refrigerator. A horse, a rainbow, something that was either a cat or a cloud, all held on with magnets from various places Marcus and Carol had visited before Lily was born. He looked at the stack of student assessments. He looked at the 2 water glasses. He looked at Marcus. He said, "My daughter is safe?" Marcus said, "Yes, she's been safe the whole time." Chaewon nodded slowly. He said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "I was not angry with her. I want you to know that. I was afraid. There is a difference. Marcus said, I know. Chaewon looked at him. He said, you knew she was here under a different name and you didn't contact anyone. It was not quite a question. Marcus answered it anyway. He said, she was a good tenant. She paid her rent. She was kind to my daughter. She didn't give me a reason to contact anyone. A pause. Chaewon said, she told you who she was eventually. Marcus said, I found out. She confirmed it. Chaewon's hands were flat on the table. He looked at them for a moment, and then back at Marcus. He said, I would like to compensate you for any... Marcus said, no. Chaewon stopped. He looked at Marcus with the expression of a man who did not often hear that word, and had enough self-awareness to know what to do with it when he did. Marcus said, she paid fair rent. She was here because she wanted to be. There's nothing to compensate. Chaewon said, she was here under false circumstances. I want to make right whatever. Marcus said, calmly, with respect, she was here under her own circumstances. Whatever she told you or didn't tell you about that is between you and her. She didn't do anything wrong in this house. Chaewon was quiet for a moment. Then, to his credit, he said, you're right. He picked up his water glass and drank from it. He set it down and was quiet again, in the way of a man sitting with something he didn't have words for yet. Marcus said, your daughter told me she wanted to know if she was a real person without your name attached. I think she found out she was. Chaewon looked at him. His expression did not change, but something around his eyes shifted in the way things shift when a person is holding something tightly and choosing to continue holding it. He said, after a moment, she is more her own person than I have given her room to be. I understand that now. I have understood it since she left. I have been afraid to say it, because saying it meant I had to change something. Marcus did not answer this. It was not the kind of thing that needed an answer. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Marcus stood and said, would you like to see the room? Chaewon looked at him. He said, the room. Marcus said, the room she's been staying in. A pause. Then Chaewon stood. Marcus led him down the short hall and opened the door to the spare room. It was small and neat in the way Soo-yeon kept it. Bed made, textbooks stacked by size. A single paper crane sitting on the window ledge that Lily had made and placed there one afternoon without asking. The hot plate was on the dresser. The old laptop was closed on the desk. Chaewon stood in the doorway and looked at all of it. He said nothing. Marcus said, she was comfortable here. Chaewon said, almost quietly, she had so little. Marcus said, I think that was the point. Another long silence. Chaewon looked at the paper crane. He reached out and picked it up carefully with 2 fingers. The way you pick something up when you're not sure if it belongs to you, but you want to hold it for a moment anyway. He looked at it. He set it back down on the ledge where it had been. They went back to the kitchen. Marcus refilled both glasses of water without being asked. They sat again. It was then that Marcus did something he could not entirely explain later. He opened the hall closet, not the kitchen closet, the one at the end of the short corridor, and he pulled out one of Carol's paintings, the small one, the one of a morning garden that Carol had done the spring before she got sick. He brought it into the kitchen and set it, leaning, against the counter. He said, my wife painted that. Chaewon looked at it. He said, she has real skill. Marcus said, she had real skill. She passed 14 months ago. Chaewon looked at Marcus with a directness that was not theatrical in any way. He said, I lost my wife 8 years ago. He said it the way men of a certain age say things that have been true for a long time, without decoration, without apology, just as a fact that has been carried so long it no longer needs packaging. Marcus looked at him. Chaewon looked back. Neither of them said anything about it further. They didn't need to. They were 2 men who had each been left alone to raise a child, and the rest of it was in the room with them without needing to be spoken. They sat at the kitchen table for another 20 minutes. They talked, not about money or circumstances or who owed whom what, but about small things. Chaewon asked what Marcus taught. Marcus told him. Chaewon said his wife had always wanted their daughter to use her hands more, to make things. He said she would have liked knowing Soo-yeon was doing something as ordinary as cooking rice on a hot plate and helping a child with fractions. He said this without self-pity. He said it like a man remembering something warmly. When Chae-won stood to leave, he extended his hand. Marcus shook it. Chae-won said, "I hope you will not hold any of this against my daughter." Marcus said, "There's nothing to hold." Chae-won nodded once. He looked at Lily's drawings on the refrigerator one more time on his way to the front door. He stopped at the horse drawing specifically. He said, "This is a good horse." Marcus said, "She's a good artist." Chae-won said, "Yes." He opened the front door. He went down the path to where the two men waited beside the car. He got in. The car pulled away from the curb quietly and drove to the end of the block and turned and was gone. Marcus stood at the open front door for a moment. The street was ordinary. The afternoon was ordinary. A neighbor 3 doors down was mowing a lawn. Somewhere a dog was barking at something it had not correctly identified. He went back inside. He picked up Carol's painting and took it back to the closet. He held it there for a moment in the dim light of the hallway. Then, slowly, he carried it back out. He walked to the kitchen and he hung it on the small nail that had always been there on the wall beside the window. A nail that had held a calendar for 2 years and nothing since. He stepped back and looked at it. It was a morning garden with light coming through small yellow flowers and a wooden fence in the background. Carol had painted it in early spring. She had been very pleased with the fence, she'd said. Getting wooden fences right was harder than it looked. The painting looked right there, on that wall, in that kitchen. It looked like it had always been there. He was still looking at it when he heard Lily's key in the front door. Soo-yeon left on a Tuesday morning, at the end of the semester, 6 weeks after her father's visit. She packed the same 2 bags she had arrived with. She dismantled the hot plate and wrapped it in the shirt it had always been wrapped in when she moved it. She stacked her textbooks by the door with a precision that felt like ceremony. Lily was at school. Marcus had arranged this on purpose. Not because he thought Lily couldn't handle it. Lily could handle most things. But because he knew Lily would have made it bigger than it needed to be, and Soo-yeon struck him as someone who needed this to be small, who needed it to end the way it had begun, quietly, just between them, without an audience. Soo-yeon brought her bags to the front door and set them down. She had her coat on and her keys in her hand. She looked at Marcus in the doorway of the kitchen. She said, "Thank you for letting me stay." He said, "Thank you for the coffee." She smiled at that. It was a real smile. Not the careful, composed one she used when she was being polite. The other one, the one that involved her whole face and came out quickly like something she had not planned. He said, "Are you going to be all right? With your father?" She said, "Yes." She said it simply and without hesitation, and he believed her. She said, "We talked. For a long time. I think we both said things we should have said years ago." She paused and added, "He told me about this house. About your wife. He said you were a good man." Marcus looked at the floor and then at the painting on the kitchen wall, just visible from where he stood. He said, "He's a good man too." She nodded. She reached into her coat pocket and placed a key on the small table by the door. The house key. She placed it precisely, neatly, the way she did everything. She picked up her bags. She said goodbye. He said, "Take care of yourself, Jenna." She paused at that. She turned and looked at him. He had used the name on purpose. She understood that. The name that was hers even when everything else wasn't. She nodded once and went down the front path to the silver Honda Civic. The cracked mirror was still held together with electrical tape. She loaded her bags into the back and got in and drove away without looking back. Not because she didn't want to, Marcus thought, but because she was the kind of person who chose to move forward cleanly and without hesitation. He closed the front door. He went back to the kitchen. He made coffee. He stood at the window with it and looked at the back garden, which needed cutting and which he would cut on Saturday. The painting was on the wall to his left. The paper crane, he had brought it from her room that morning before she was up. He wasn't sure why. He just wanted it in the kitchen. Sat on the window ledge where Lily had first put one months ago. He thought about a semester. Just one. To know if you were a real person without the weight of everything attached to your name. He thought about what courage that took, and how quietly it had been done. He thought about Lily's shoe, which was no longer a problem. The bank had received a payment, anonymous, through a third-party account. The letter said, "No name attached." The amount was enough to bring the mortgage fully current. Marcus had read the letter twice, and set it on the table, and looked at it for a long time. He could not prove where the money had come from. He had no evidence. There was no paper trail with a name on it. There was simply a balance that had shifted from red to current, clean and precise as everything she ever did. He had not tried to return it. He understood that this was not compensation. It was not about owing. She had said herself that she had chosen this house because the money would matter here. She had meant it then. She had found a way to mean it completely at the end. The mortgage was current. The brake pads had been replaced. Lily had new shoes, a pair of good ones, properly fitted, without any holes near the left toe. These were facts. Marcus sat with them. 3 weeks after Soo-yeon left, a journalist called from a newspaper that had picked up the international news story about Chaewon Park's daughter and the American household she had lived in anonymously for a semester. The journalist asked if Marcus would like to share his experience. He was polite. Marcus was polite back. Marcus said, "She was a very good tenant." The journalist said, "Can you say more than that?" Marcus said, "She didn't leave dishes in the sink." The journalist said, "Surely there's more to the story than..." Marcus said, "I'm sure there is, but it's not mine to tell." He thanked the journalist for calling and hung up. A letter arrived for Lily 4 weeks after that. Korean stamps. Her name in handwriting that was careful and neat, the same kind of careful and neat that had left the kitchen counter cleaner than it was found. Inside was a single folded note, and, tucked into it, a small pressed flower from a garden somewhere. Lily read the note alone at the kitchen table. When Marcus asked, later, what it said, Lily folded it back up and said, "Stuff." He nodded. He said, "Good stuff?" Lily thought about this very seriously for a moment. She said, "Yeah, good stuff." He asked nothing else. She went upstairs to put the letter somewhere he would never look, which was entirely right and entirely hers to do. He sat in the kitchen. The painting was on the wall. The paper crane was on the ledge. Outside the window, the back garden was trimmed, and the afternoon was passing the way ordinary afternoons pass. Slowly enough to be inside, quickly enough to be surprised that it was already gone. He picked up his coffee cup. It was empty. He stood and refilled it and sat back down, and it was enough. It was in the plainest and quietest way, entirely enough. Some things arrive in your house under one name and leave under another, and in between, if you are paying attention, they show you something about your own life that you had forgotten how to see. Marcus Webb had rented a spare room. He had not rented anything as simple as that. He understood this now. He had let something real into a house that had been waiting, without knowing it, for exactly that. The room was empty again. But the house was not the same room it had been, and Marcus, sitting in the morning light with his coffee and his daughter's paper crane on the ledge and his wife's painting on the wall, was not the same man who had smoothed a bedsheet over a spare mattress and told himself this was just practical. It had been more than that. It had been, against all reasonable expectation, more than that. He drank his coffee. He heard Lily's alarm go off upstairs. He heard her groan and then go quiet, and then, after a moment, her feet hit the floor. The morning began.